ॐ सहनावतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Hari Om and welcome to this very interesting session today, where 5 Vedanta sadhaks, sorry for that, Hari Om and welcome to this very interesting session today, where 5 Vedanta sadhaks, 5 of our fellow students will each make a presentation on a topic of their choice. They will have a total of 10 minutes each, within which they will make their presentations. And if time permits, there will be a follow-up question and answer, strictly related to the topic of the presentation just made. So to make this smooth and effective, please raise your hand for me to get you on the screen and ask your question. So I seek your cooperation in making this first time event a success. I will now introduce the first presenter of the day, Bharat Lalwani, a student of Vedanta for 14 years now. Bharat is a coordinator for almost all our activities and also shoulders the responsibility of administrative director of the Vedanta Wisdom Trust. A diehard fitness enthusiast, the admin of all our WhatsApp groups. He's our man Friday, our go-to person for all things related to the activities of the Vedanta Wisdom Trust. His topic for today is likes and dislikes. Over to Bharat.
Hari Om, everyone. Is this audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Perhaps the most valuable lesson of all education is the ability to do the thing that you have to when it ought to be done, whether you like it or not. It is the first lesson that you ought to learn. And no matter how early your training begins, it is the last lesson you will master thoroughly, said Thomas Huxley. Likes and dislikes is the natural reaction of the mind, and they make for a powerful force. So powerful that they dictate or should dictate your field of activity, your swadharma. The trouble begins when you start responding basis your likes and dislikes alone without rational intervention. Because the facts of life dictate what is beneficial in the end begins on a bitter note. What is detrimental in the end begins on a pleasurable note. The consequences of following likes and dislikes is attachment to the things that you like and aversion to the things that you dislike. And what is outside of these two boxes, you are indifferent to. Since the mind can only go in the realms of the known, the areas that it is indifferent to necessarily have to be vast. This greatly limits human potential. So the way out in the long term would be to make judicial use of this pleasure-seeking tendency of the mind by making use of your intellect, expose the mind to higher, subtler joys. A mind that enjoys higher joys will happily give up the lower ones. The way out in the short term would be to fix a goal. A life without a goal will helplessly revolve around likes and dislikes. So the discipline required to follow the right course of action forces the mind to drop its likes and dislikes, reducing its obstinacy, making it possible for the intellect to control it. And as Oliver Holmes said, to sum up, a mind that is stretched by a new idea never goes back to its old dimensions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. Now, if anybody has any questions, you can please raise your hands and I'll take you on the screen.
So any questions or clarifications, please? Yes, Kalyan.
Yeah, I had one sort of observation on what you said. One of the things which you said is one way to avoid being driven by likes and dislikes is to have that higher goal. Not one way. You said very authoritatively that's the way. Now, I'm not so sure just by having a higher goal, your likes and dislikes will go away. There must be many other
I'm
things.
sorry, you're breaking a little.
So I said, you said one of the way to avoid likes and dislikes or being driven by them is to have a higher goal. Okay. Is it clear now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I'm not so sure just by having a higher goal, your likes and dislikes will not, I mean, you'll not be controlled by your likes and dislikes. There may be many other things which on the pursuit of the higher goal you need to do, like do the 3 yogas and have that focus on the higher desire, but while practicing the 3 yogas, etc. So the way you said it came out saying that just by having a higher goal, likes and dislikes will not drive you. You will be not driven by them. So I don't know whether.
Yeah. So what one meant was to have a higher ideal. So it implied that you need to do your 3 yogas. And when you're doing them, the lower pulls and pressures of the mind will go because the mind is now enjoying higher things.
Yeah. Okay. You're saying those are instruments on the path to the higher goal, and once you start practicing those, then your mind will not be driven by likes and dislikes.
Yes, at least the lower ones will not pull you, but at that level, I mean, mind can get carried away with the higher ideal also, right? So the intellect will constantly need to pull it and push it towards higher and higher things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. we can now go to the next speaker. The next speaker for today is Reshma Jethwani. Reshma is a student of Vedanta since 2019, a pharma graduate. She's doing client servicing for a fintech company. Whoever fears that philosophy, especially the study of Vedanta, can make them into boring individuals should make note of Reshma's multifaceted personality. As ardent a student of Vedanta that she is, she also likes listening to music, talking to friends, watching movies, and dancing. Her topic for today is chronology of action. Over to you, Reshma.
Thank you, Omkar. Chronology of action. This is a topic taken from the Vedanta treatise, The Eternities, by Swami Parthasarthi. Chapter 5, Exigency of Action. For reference, you can refer pages 94 to 97 of edition 18. The mission of human life is to attain self-realization, the state of actionlessness. It can be gained by acting in a spirit of renunciation and not by merely renouncing actions. Thus, one has to perform action to transcend action and use the world to outgrow the world. Vasanas form the mass of ignorance that veil your divine self. A Sanskrit word derived from the root vas, meaning scent, fragrance. It is the basic material composing the human personality. Vasanas produce one's personality traits. Good vasanas produce a pleasant personality, whereas bad vasanas produce a foul one. Vasanas are indicated as the inherent tendency, innate bent, inmost nature of a person. They are the roots of one's actions. The type of actions executed differs from individual to individual since every human being is distinctly individualistic. Our present vasanas are produced by our past actions, and the present vasanas produce further actions or future actions. Therefore, vasana is the cause and action is the effect. Again, action becomes the cause and vasana the effect. Vasanas are unmanifest and lie dormant as our potential nature. Action is its final manifestation. In the chronology of action, each vasana passes through the stages of thought and desire before reaching its full expression. So, upon manifestation, vasanas first appear as thoughts in our intellect, which entertains thoughts according to the nature of our present vasanas. In the second stage of manifestation, vasanas express as desires in our mind, which will also be in the nature of our vasanas and thoughts. Thus, thought, desire, and action emanate from vasanas like a video projection from a compact disc. Thus, every being acts according to its own vasanas. For example, a painter has vasanas for painting. While asleep, the vasanas remain dormant without expression. Upon waking up, the vasana expresses itself in the intellect as the thought of painting. Thought manifests in the mind as desire for painting, and desire expresses in the physical body as action of painting. Therefore, it follows that as long as vasanas exist, there will be a constant flow of thoughts, desires, and actions. And when exhausted, these thoughts, desires, and actions will become extinct. This total exhaustion of vasanas is the exalted state of self-realization, described as the state of vasanaless, thoughtlessness, desirelessness, and actionlessness. This state has been misconstrued to mean abstinence from action, even when vasanas remain within. Consequently, people impose physical restraints and deny themselves material and sensual life, little realizing that vasanas, thoughts, desires, and actions linger within and frustrate their lifestyle. Such practices lead to suppression rather than sublimation of the personality, which interferes with and hinders the goal of self realization. So, to sum it up, the chronology of action is vasanas give rise to thoughts, thoughts give rise to desires, and desires give rise to actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Reshma. I don't. Okay, There's a question from Deepraj, and I'll bring you on the screen.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, you said action becomes the cause and vasanas the effect. How can actions become the cause for vasanas when vasanas are subtler than actions?
Yes, what you are saying is right, Deepraj. So, this is the general chronology. And what happens is that every time we take an action, it is also coming from somewhere. As we have just discussed, that actions have a source which is arising from the vasanas. So, obviously, action cannot influence vasanas, but there is a subtler equipment in our personality, which is self effort or purushartha, as we call it. So, the self effort is what will make a choice whether to go with your current vasana or against your current vasana, depending on the choice that you make, that will further strengthen the existing vasana or weaken it. So it is actually the purusharth which is the missing link, but because it's subtler than vasanas and we don't understand vasanas itself, that has not been put into this picture.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Reshma?
I have one more question if it's fine.
Sure.
In How Do You Know What We Know, it has mentioned that Hiranyagarbha is an important influence. How does Hiranyagarbha fit in the chronology of action?
So, when you are saying Hiranyagarbha, you are referring to the external influences in our environment, right? Okay. So, what happens is that when a person is born, they have a particular set of vasanas called as prarabdha vasanas. And we have taken that particular birth to experience the life in that form. So, what happens is that the environment, as you said earlier, like environment is gross, right? So the environment cannot influence the subtler. So the source will still remain the vasanas, but in our entire vasana bank, which is the sanchita vasanas, there may be weaker vasanas which will tend to get influenced as the mind gets attached to external factors, and you may choose to go with the mind if the intellect is weak. So you may pursue things in the short term, which will eventually fizzle out, or you may continue to do something which is not your chunk of vasanas, which will probably tend to frustrate you. That could be one of the reasons. And so that for maybe for exhaustion of those vasanas, it may come up, but eventually the vasanas will override. So your actual nature will eventually manifest. The best examples we can see that children are born in extremely unconducive environment for philosophy eventually become self-realized souls. Buddha may be one example. Prahlad was born in a family which was not as conducive for self-realization as he was. So these are the examples which we have seen. Hence, we can conclude that.
Thank you.
Well, we have just 2 minutes, so Komal, if you can make that quick.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask what is the way out to go beyond vasanas? Like, mm, I think you explained it, but it's not clear to me. Beyond vasana, how to go about that you are actionless, desireless, everything. What is the way out for that?
Right. So, as Deepraj was asking earlier, because actions are grosser than vasanas, actions cannot influence vasanas. So, as I mentioned, there was a subtler equipment which is called as self-effort in common parlance. So, what happens is that human beings are the only creatures who have a choice of action. So, whenever a thought arises in the intellect, two things can happen. One is either the intellect can govern and direct that thought and towards a particular goal which the intellect may have set, or if the intellect is weak or it loses governance, it will go in the direction of the mind and become indiscriminate, in which case it can become a desire or an attachment. So when the thought arises, every human being has this choice whether I want to go with along with this thought or do I want to stop it right here. So depending on the strength of your intellect, you will be able to execute that choice. So as you choose to make better choices over a period of time, those vasanas will not give rise to further vasanas, which means that the purpose behind your action is becoming subtler. Like Bharat was stating, that when you have a higher goal, you're not doing it for yourself anymore. As it grows subtler and subtler, then it will come to a level where you are doing actions for the greater cause and ultimately for self-realization. And that is how the vasanas can eventually reduce and fall off in the end.
Thank you. Nice.
Thank you, Reshma. We now go to the next speaker for the day. Sorry for my very bad throat. I couldn't help this. Our next speaker for the day is Deepraj Datta. Just give me a second. Deepraj is a PhD student of mathematics. His specialization is game theory and operations research. He has been a student of Vedanta since 2021. A regular student in Jankiji's classes, many of us here would have witnessed his intelligent questions and answers in classes. As part of his Karma Yoga, he is involved in the management of the Vedanta Wisdom Journal. His topic for the day is renunciation. What is it and why it's important? Over to you, Deepraj.
Harim, everybody. Thanks for coming to the student seminar. It's a very interesting event. I would present my topic on renunciation, what it is and why it is important. Renunciation or sannyas, we have all heard of it and we all have an idea of what it is. But is our notion of what it is correct? We humans have a particular knack of getting things wrong, especially with things that are way above our comprehension. When we look at a person that has given up his familial ties and wealth and has gone off to live as a beggar, is this necessarily renunciation? Do we confer the status of renunciation based on material possessions? If that be so, who should decide what one should give up? Should one give up his wealth, his house, his family, his clothes, or even his life? What is the limit to such an endeavor? So, to understand renunciation properly, we have to look at its antonyms, materialism and sensualism. Does a materialist or sensualist cease to become so when he is robbed of his wealth and enjoyment? The answer is a resounding no. Therefore, what separates the materialist and sensualist from a renunciate is not whether or not he possesses or dispossesses, but what value he puts on those possessions or dispossessions. Just like how the difference between a child and an adult is not whether or not they possess toys or not, but it is rather the value they put on those toys. Why has the adult suddenly taken the bold step of being away from those important toys? The child may ask. But does the adult see it that way? The adult places no value on those toys that are so valuable to the child. He doesn't look upon himself as giving up anything. Thus, the irony of renunciation is that it never appears so to the person who has actually renounced. But why does the adult not see it that way? It is because he has values for something that the child cannot comprehend. To him, it is obvious, but to the child, it is an act of great sacrifice. Thus, our status of renunciation is not dictated by the quantum of our possessions, but the value we put on those possessions. But why are we making such a fuss about renunciation, and why bring up children in this discussion? It is to make us realize how far we have come and how much farther we have to reach. The bliss and success that we experience is an outcome of our relative renunciation. So, what can ultimate renunciation get us? Our desires come out of ignorance of the self. The desires in us shape the very way we look at the world. Thus, the more the desire, the more corrupted our vision becomes. Our level of renunciation is directly proportional to our spiritual growth, and therefore, without renunciation, there is no growth. How is that so? Because we can never put the right value on something as long as we have a desire for it. Because the very fact that we have a desire for it distorts the actual nature of that object or being. Therefore, renunciation is our only ticket to growth. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Deepraj. Komal has no. Any questions for Deepraj?
Can I can I ask a question, sir?
Sure, but I don't see you.
Are you-
Can you switch
I'm
on your
not-
video?
Yeah.
Can you please tell me
Can
your
you-
name?
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Dilip ji.
हाँ जी.
Okay.
I've been a Vedantic student for last 10 years, and now I'm going through dialysis for last 4 years at 75. Even the doctors are surprised that I have done more than 550 dialysis, whereas the average age for a person over 70 is hardly 400. Now, at this stage, when I'm going through dialysis every alternate day for 6 hours, I want to know what should be my renunciations practices.
Dilip ji,
Because the doctors said that at 75 and with 550 dialysis, we don't know how many more you can take.
Dilip ji, renunciation is not something you practice, it is your current state. So, so the stage that you are at, the values that you put on the objects is your state of renunciation. It is not something you practice. What you practice and what everybody has to practice at every stage is three things: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga.
Yes.
So
I've
these are
understood
the
that.
three things that you do, and you continue doing it.
My thought process only is now what I should do so that the next generation I start something from here. That was my whole thought process presently.
Yes, so you set a goal for yourself and you work towards that goal. It's the same for everybody at any age that they're at. You set a goal for yourself. You want to benefit the future generation, so you set a goal for yourself, a concrete goal as to what can help do that. For a lot of us, we are setting up the Vedanta University because we believe that that's a noble cause that will not only help the youth but every age group, every race, every gender. That's the greatest service we can do to humanity. So you do the same thing.
No, I am trying to do that. But the thought, every day, the thought when I am going through dialysis is what next? What to do now? The thought process doesn't stop there.
You can talk to somebody about that I cannot think of what to do. Could you please suggest some ways? And that, like, it's best to talk to somebody that knows about you and your life so that they can be more specific.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for Deepraj?
Yes, Omkar. So, Deepraj, you mentioned that so long as we have a desire for something, we can't learn to place the right value for it. Correct.
Yes.
So, but the desire for the higher is encouraged. So, is desire a problem or the uncontrolled desire is the problem?
Desire itself is the problem. Because Bharat, when we have the desire for the highest, we are placing a incorrect value on the higher. And the incorrect value we're placing is that it is something different from us, that it is somewhere we have to reach. So our desire obviously veils our actual understanding of what it is. And when we get rid of the final desire, we actually see it for what it is. So yes, it is distorting the reality. Our desire for the reality distorts the reality.
Is that okay, Bharat? Can we now move to the next speaker?
Not sure, but it's okay. Yeah, since we are short of time, we can go ahead.
Okay, we can take one quick question from Surekha.
Yes, so Deepraj, this is a follow-up to what Bharat said, that in renunciation, as Swamiji said, is it's not giving up, but it's like taking up something higher so that the lower falls. So it's important to have something higher so that you can go towards it, isn't it? I mean,
Yes. Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Our next speaker for the day is Meera Nair. Meera is a postgraduate in mass communications and journalism. She has been in the field of journalism for the last 20 years. She developed an interest in Vedanta philosophy by attending public lectures of Swamiji, that is Swami Parthasarthi, and is now a student of Jankiji. She has also done a certificate course from Harvard University on Hinduism through its scriptures. As part of her Karma Yoga, she is instrumental in the launch of the Trust's official website, www.vedantawisdom.in. She is also part of the editorial team of the Vedanta Wisdom Journal. Her topic for the day is the concept of sin and its relationship to the self. Over to you, Meera. No, you're on mute, Meera.
You have to unmute.
Not audible, Meera.
Okay. Can you hear?
But there's an echo, Meera. I think you'll have to switch off one device. No, we can't hear.
Not audible.
Maybe you can log off from the laptop.
So in the interest of time, Meera, I will give the floor to Surekha and you can fix your in the meantime. Is that fine? Just raise your hand if that's fine. We can't hear you.
Can you hear us, Meera?
Yes.
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, fine. So who's a sinner? Haven't we all thought about this several times in our lives? We read about violent incidents in the newspapers and often form our own judgments about the people involved. Does the person deserve forgiveness, or does he or she need to be punished? The recent shocking revelation of a mother, a CEO of a company, smothering her child in a hotel in Goa, since both she and her husband were fighting for custody of their child, is a case in point. Now, is she a sinner or not? We can decide this at the end of this presentation. Meanwhile, I will endeavor to try and answer some of these questions according to Vedanta's interpretation of sin. So, what is the concept of sin according to Vedanta philosophy? You would be surprised to know that in Vedanta, the concept of sin is determined not by the action itself, by the mental reaction it produces. By our standards, a person doing a wrong action may be a sinner, but this is not quite so. The reason, sin is subjective. Now, what do I mean by saying sin is subjective? Actions intrinsically are neither meritorious nor sinful. The intention, as well as the internal mental reaction, decides the nature of the action. This is because even though sin refers to any action that causes harm, injury, or suffering to oneself, others, or the world, it should result in mental distress, guilt, and remorse for the doer. If it doesn't, it is not considered a sin. This resultant mental agitation is what makes an action a sin. One of the best examples of guilt and remorse in English literature is that of Macbeth when he says, "Macbeth shall sleep no more," or "Will all great Neptunes, ocean, wash this blood clean from my hand?" This shows the amount of guilt he felt. He describes this by saying that if he tried to wash his hands in the river, it would turn into the color of blood. Now let's take an example of sin being subjective. Have you ever thought about whether eating meat is a sin? If you eat meat and you feel mentally disturbed, then you are sinning. But on the other hand, if you don't feel any agitation while consuming meat, then as far as you're concerned, it is not a sin. So from where do these sinful actions originate from? Where did Macbeth's horrendous act of killing King Duncan originate from? Well, any sinful action stems from desire, selfishness, attachments, egoism, ignorance, delusion, and negligence of one's swadharma, or obligatory duties. In this case, Macbeth's desire to be king overwhelmed his sanity. An example of not following one's swadharma can be taken from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna advises Arjuna to fight this righteous war against his cousins, and if he doesn't, he would be deviating from his swadharma as a Kshatriya and abandoning his obligatory duty, thereby incurring dishonor, which will result in a guilty conscience, tantamount to sinning. Though the just mentioned attributes may be the reasons for sinning, what is the root cause for these attributes? This brings us to this key concept which we cannot ignore. The cause of sin in this world and his relationship with the self or Atman. Our entire relationship with the world is based on who we think we are. Confusing the self or Atman with the body, mind, and intellect results in sin. Eventually, it binds us to the cycle of birth and death. The ignorance of the self is the primary cause for all sin in this world. We are born in this world because of our desires. Though the self within us is paripurna, complete, pure, supreme, and blissful, we feel a sense of incompleteness and we look to the world for fulfillment of this void within us. Consequently, our thoughts rush to the world of objects and beings in an attempt to fill this void. This continuous flow of thoughts towards an object or being creates desire, which, when interrupted by another being or object, deflects it. This deflected thought flow manifests as anger. Other manifestations of desire and anger are greed, arrogance, envy, competition, and fear. Desire can be of three types through which you can sin: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. The more powerful the desire, the greater the agitation and mental agony. This is because the self within you is veiled by one or more of the above desire types. The stronger your desire, the less your conscience can speak to you. As you evolve, this level of desires decreases and the voice of conscience becomes stronger. For example, Prahlad was born into a Rakshasa family, but his conscience did not allow him to do anything wrong. So why is sin different for different people? Each one of us is at different levels of evolution. This results in different degrees of agitation. Hence, at different levels of evolution, different things appear right or wrong to us. It would be prudent to remember that all beings act helplessly due to their vasanas. But even if a wicked man has lived his life in evil ways up to the present moment he resolves to take the path of self-realization, he becomes righteous. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, my devotee is never destroyed. Any work done with full conviction in one's line of duty is not considered a sin. Example, Krishna started this war in Mahabharata, causing a lot of pain to others, but as far as he's concerned, he was not sinning. A lawyer protecting a criminal may appear to be sinning, but for him, it is only a duty or a profession, just like a soldier killing an enemy in war. In conclusion, I would like to summarize those actions that come back and agitate us mentally are called sins. Sin is subjective. Sinful actions emanate from selfish desires. An action could be a sin for one, but for another, it may not be. Where we are on the path of spiritual growth will determine the level of our agitations. Not following one's Swadharma will result in various manifestations of desire. Actions per se are neither meritorious nor sinful. The intention as well as the internal mental reaction decides the nature of the action. Any action done with full conviction in one lines of duty is not considered a sin. Therefore, whether you are a sinner or not can best be decided by the doer of the action. Vedanta does not sit in judgment. Thank you.
Okay. We have a question from Deepraj. Deepraj, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Meera, for the nice presentation. My question is regarding the kind of fluid nature of sin. So it will be sin. I mean, a person may not immediately get the negative emotions or agitations, but he might get it at a later stage. So it was not sin for him previously, but it became a sin later. How does that work?
Yeah, it depends on your evolution at that time. Say, suppose you find that you have, done something wrong to a person at that present moment, and you don't regret it, and you don't find it a sin. But after 2-3 years, you do feel, okay, I sense a feeling of regret. This may be a reason of you evolving as a person, and as a spiritually evolving as a person, and you have had time to reflect upon it, or even and that's how you create remorse and regret. The whole idea that this event has become a sin is because you're mentally feeling that regret and remorse. 2 years back, probably you didn't feel it, but later this same incident seems a sin to you because you're mentally affected by it.
So your mental agitation can be an indicator to your spiritual growth.
Yes.
Thank you.
We can take one more quick question from Kalyan. Go ahead, Kalyan.
Yeah. Meera, I'm somehow not, sitting comfortably with the premise that it is a sin when you're mentally disturbed or agitated only, whatever is the nature of action. Okay, that premise somehow is not, I'm not comfortable with that. Because if you take that premise, then anybody can do anything. And depending on his gunas, let's say somebody is only tamasic. Okay, then I will never feel a sense of remorse or agitation. I will continue to be, whatever, living my life with inertia, indolence, carelessness. So I will not be a sinner. So that is completely not in agreement.
See, vasanas, you see, as I mentioned, there are 3 kinds of desires: rajasic, sattvic, and tamasic. Okay, so it is you and all of us are veiled with 3 of those, either of those 3 or 1 or 2 of those, which is covering your original self. So the basic idea here is that how do you overcome that? So it is not for a rajasic person to overcome, it's going to be it requires a lot of effort. For a sattvic person, it requires little effort. And there are a lot of examples for these. And for the tamasic person, it is one of the grossest thing that can happen to you, because it is compared in Swamiji's book as a child in, an embryo in a womb, which takes 9 months to, fructify. And this not only requires effort and a lot of pain. So you may never, realize that you are sinning if you're a tamasic person at that point of view. Because as I say, the degrees of evolution vary. So sim for some would be mental agitation arising from a physical action where you kill someone. For others, it may be verbal, where you shout at someone and then you're filled with guilt and remorse. And for someone else, it may arise from the mind when you just have a mean thought about a person crossing your mind and you're filled with guilty conscience. So even if a wicked man has lived his life in evil ways up to the present moment, the moment he resolves to take the path of self-realization, as I mentioned earlier, he becomes righteous. So it purely depends on you, how you would evolve. So vasanas definitely play a role.
Thank you, Meera. I'm sorry we can't take any further questions. If there is time, we will take your questions, Uttara and Mani, at the end of the session.
Thank you.
Please give me a minute. Our last speaker for the day is Surekha Gugule. Surekha is a student of Vedanta since 11 years. She's an architect working in an international development NGO for the past 20 years. As part of her Karma Yoga, she is helping Janki-ji in her initiatives like book editing, selection of the site for the upcoming Vedanta Wisdom University, and is ever eager to help wherever and whenever she is needed. Our topic for today is duty in life. Over to you, Surekha.
Will you be sharing the slides?
Yes,
or should I
yes,
share? Okay.
I will.
Okay, Hari Om, everybody. Well, a lot of my other, student colleagues have spoken about swadharma, action, sin, etc. Now, my topic is what is duty in life? We've heard this word being repeated many times in today's presentations. And I'm going to take you through defining duty, what are the fundamental duties in our life, what are the different categories, are there any guiding principles for performing duty, and what is the outcome of duty well performed. So let's go to defining duty. The essence of yagna or sacrifice is an important element in our traditions and interpreted as performing selfless actions dedicated to a high and noble ideal. In our lives, yagna translates to performing one's obligatory duties without indulging in ego and egocentric desires. This enables us to diligently pursue the inner self rather than get distracted and pulled away by our senses. In effect, our primary duty in life is to get back to the self, which is our original identity. Since birth, we are recipients of nature's gifts, and in order, just a minute, please, I'll tell you. Okay, you can keep this on. Since birth, we are recipients of nature's gifts, and in order to repay this enormous debt, we need to perform our obligatory duties with a sense of dedication and detachment, with the spirit of giving instead of merely receiving or demanding. When we are governed by our senses and the mind, we become infatuated by the material elements in the world, and we remain oblivious of the benefits of doing sacrifice and continue the downward spiral in life. Therefore, it is important to identify obligatory duty and perform action as early as possible in life. Let's come to the fundamental duties in life. Determining the previous one, please. Yeah. Determining our basic nature is a fundamental duty in life. This is done, as spoken before, through a careful assessment of our tendencies, inclinations, likes, and dislikes. In short, it is recognizing the constitution of our vasanas. Having done that, the next duty is to identify a field of activities that would suit our vasanas or predominant nature, known as our swadharma. And then it is an important duty and a responsibility to follow activities dedicated by our Swadharma. However, it needs to be under the supervision of the intellect to ensure that the inherent likes and dislikes are properly channelized towards performance of our said obligatory duties within the field of Swadharmic activity. So it's a very specific fundamental duty that has been explained to. The next, please. The types of obligatory duty in our life fall into two categories: regular duties performed in the usual course of life, and special duties that we are called upon to perform occasionally. The intellect is the best guide to determine the prioritization of one over the other. The manner in which obligatory duties are performed is also well prescribed in Vedanta. Daily actions need to be performed with a vision in mind for them to qualify as duty, or else they could end up as mere drudgery. The grandeur of duty is lost because the concept of vision is gone. Whereas even drudgery, when done with a higher vision, can become duty. This is because having a vision allows us to develop a self-generated initiative, which leads us to seeing something greater than the pettiness of life. And that, my friends, changes everything for us. Similarly, duty cannot be performed through action which is forced or coerced, especially when we self-impose duties upon ourselves that seem to crush us. In such instances, it is important to remind ourselves of this fact. The next, please. There are certain guiding principles for performance of duty. Duty, when performed with a goal of self-development leading to self-realization, needs to be performed with Shraddha, which is faith and consistency. A sattvic person performs obligatory duties effortlessly, as this resonates with the conscience and thus flows freely. Performing obligatory duties also defines renunciation in a sattvic person, since a higher value is attributed towards it. A rajasic person, on the other hand, experiences discomfort and hardship while performing obligatory duties, to a sense of doership and the predominance of likes and dislikes, whereas a tamasic person is ignorant of obligatory duties to be performed in the first place. Next, please. Therefore, recognizing our Swadharma and performing actions therein with a higher vision and with Shraddha, we are able to perform our obligatory duties well in life. This ensures peace and prosperity, which helps us maintain a cheerful, stable, and happy disposition in life. And this, incidentally, is also an important duty in life while transacting with the world at all times. As they say, smile and the world smiles with you, cry and you'll cry alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Surekha. Any questions for Surekha? Yeah, go ahead, Deepraj.
Yeah, I still cannot. Okay. The difference between the regular duties and special duties. Why do we put a category of special duties, and what confers the status of a special duty? I mean, like what makes something a special duty?
So special duty is something that we called upon occasionally to do, right? Like in our textbook, it's defined as it could be a funeral activity, or things like when we remember our ancestors once a year. It could also be a special duty. For example, if you're doing your morning study and there's a knock on your door, and your neighbor has a heart attack and requests you to take him to the hospital, then you have to use your intellect to say, do I continue with my morning study because it is my duty, or do you take the call to, okay, this is more important at this point of time, and you'll take your neighbor to the hospital. So that's a special duty which can just come onto your radar at any point of time, where you have to go beyond your call of duty, as they say, and perform action.
But why? Why would we perform that action?
Exactly. Would you want your neighbor to just die of a heart attack because you can't pull yourself out of morning study? That's a question you have to ask yourself, because you're called to do it. That's your service. You talk about service and sacrifice. There is something which sometimes transcends your mundane activities, and you have to rise to the occasion to do it.
But it's not. But morning studies is not a mundane activity.
It's your daily activity. It may not be mundane, but it is daily. You do it every day, but your neighbor doesn't get a heart attack every day. So that's the call of duty you have to rise to at times.
I mean, I can get it, and obviously one would do it. But my question is, what are the parameters by which we decide that? I mean, there's bad things happening all over the place, but we're not leaving our morning studies, right? If we start attending to everything, then we'll leave our morning studies every day. We'll leave our karma every day.
So that's the reason why your intellect has to kick in. It's the level of your intellect that will decide what takes predominance at that particular point of time. It's like reflex action, right? I mean, you touch a hot stove, instinctively you draw your hand back because your signal doesn't go up to the brain. It's the spinal cord which decides at that point of time, because if you don't do it, you'll have a fatal injury. So that's what, it's as serious as that. And that's how sharp your intellect needs to be for you to perform that particular special duty.
I have to think about that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Meera.
I can't hear you, Meera.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I would just like to add to the Praj's question. Will voting be a special duty? Going to vote?
I think going to vote is a fundamental duty.
But it can be classified as a
because it has to, because it comes just once in 4 years of 5 years, whenever we have our elections. It's your right as a citizen. You also need to be, you can't be a passive citizen. That is also something that is proscribed in Vedanta. You have to use your intellect. And obviously, you're making a choice. Voting is one of the biggest things, because you're making, it's a discriminatory action. Definitely, It is a special duty.
And it's a responsibility, right?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we just, okay, Komal, you also have a question?
Yes, ma'am. It was a nicely explained thing. One thing I want to, like, many a times while answering the questions of others, you're using the word intellect, like use your intellect. So different people have different categories of intellect or different level of intellect. Is there any way out to sharpen the intellect? Like how to sharpen it so that we'll quickly respond to the right thing easily? Anything can be done about it?
Morning study is the only thing that is prescribed.
So that sharpens the intellect.
Yes,
Studying, whether it is morning or any time, getting with the knowledge, right knowledge maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. Not any time.
There's time for just one more last question. Deepak ji has a question. Would you like to ask a question, or do you want me to read it out, Deepak?
You may read it out.
I have a really bad throat today.
No, then I'll do it. I'll do it. Surekha ji, you said, you talked about actions which are directed based on your swadharma to a higher ideal. Where would you classify this, as a regular duty or anitya karma, which is a special duty? Because after a while, it's supposed to become, it's special to begin with, but then it becomes a part of your daily commitment.
Deepak ji, I think it falls in both categories. You can't really classify them as special, or because you're right. If it is something that you're going to adopt into your daily routine, it's a regular duty. But it also could be a special duty. For example, when we do fundraising for the university, it's a special duty where you're called to do it, and you're doing it for a higher ideal. So you can't really categorize it according to that. It can fall within all within both of them.
I think that's very fair. So what you're saying is that within the parameter of your higher ideal, the action and the duty that you are performing will determine whether it's a regular one or whether it's a one-off in with respect to that higher ideal. Thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you, Sureka, and thank you all the speakers. Thank you, Bharat, for conceptualizing and making this special session possible. I found that very interesting, and I hope everybody here also did. Looking forward to many more such sessions. I'm sorry if I could not take up all the questions. There were 2 questioners waiting for, but in the interest of time, we can't take them right now. But I'll try to have your questions answered in some other session. So thank you and Hari Om, everybody.
Thank you.
Hari Om, everybody.